Hey, Jackie, welcome to the show.
Hey, Brittany, it's so good to be on here and talk with you.
It is my pleasure to have you on. We like to diversify the types of voices we have on, and you are this really interesting advocate group working on something that's pertinent to almost all of our listeners, whether they be entrepreneurs, investors, or just consumers themselves. It affects them. So I'm really excited for this interview. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, and I love all the work you're doing. It's so great to get to connect.
Let's kick off the interview with learning more about you. Our listeners always want to kind of know the human behind the interview. So tell us a little bit about your story, where you're from, your journey, your career. How did you end up here?
Yeah, my story in the sexual wellness and women's health space really starts 5 years ago. I was in grad school at Harvard Kennedy School, and I had an unusual upbringing in that my dad was really open, really empowering when it specifically on topics of women's sexual pleasure. So basically going back from my grandfather to my dad and then through my brother, when like men in my family start dating a woman for the first time, they get this talk about female pleasure that is like very scientific and dispels myths and is about the clitoris and making sure that they understand that female pleasure is associated with the
God.
clitoris and that, yeah. And then Hollywood makes, a lot of these myths of like women having orgasms all from intercourse is not the majority of women. So literally my dad gave that lecture to my brother. He'd gotten it from his dad. And my mom wasn't having those conversations with me. And so my dad would have these really like supportive conversations that I never really appreciated when I was like 19 and he was talking about this quirky, crazy stuff that I thought was just so strange. But in my mid 20s in a leadership class at Harvard, I shared some stories about my dad and I started to realize how special that was. And all these people started to ask me questions about their intimate lives or parenting. And I realized that, wow, you can make such a positive impact in people's lives in the area of sexuality. I'd been a social entrepreneur since I was a teenager. I started my first nonprofit when I was 14. That's like still going, almost 2 decades later. And, but I'd never thought about you can create impact related to like people's intimate lives. And started to think about it in 2017, started to learn about all these incredible entrepreneurs that were innovating in sex tech and realized knew pretty quickly that I knew before I knew what the word sex tech was that I wanted to be a part of this space. But I also started to learn about how silenced women were being on topics of sexual health and pleasure. And I really empathized with it, especially because when I was at Harvard, I really faced a really traumatic experience where I needed to report sexual assault and was really told in the process that I wasn't allowed to and had my voice really stifled. So I think part of why I have empathized with entrepreneurs who are censored from sharing information about women's health is that it's so connected to this experience that we have so much more broadly of being censored and silenced. And I think a part of a broader societal transformation that's needed is about reclaiming and being able to speak our voices.
Yeah. I have a lot of listeners give me feedback on the show saying like, you're just so real. And I'm like,
yeah, you so are
crazy when you have a platform and you can just say whatever you want and talk about your body and your
totally.
experiences. And, people eat it up
Yeah.
because women are so censored. It's like a rare
Yeah.
thing to hear real life
Yeah.
stories.
It really is. Yeah. And it's a privilege to be in spaces where you have that freedom and like to be able to
Yeah.
create other spaces, especially as entrepreneurs, you get to design your own company culture. And, you know, I've interviewed people that are like, I don't know whether I should disclose this experience if I'll be discriminated against. And you're like, no, this is a space where when you get to set the values, you get to make people feel really supported.
Yeah, I do think about that, especially with abortion. I talk very openly about had an abortion, and
Wow.
interviewing people about abortion, and or even an eating disorder. And there are definitely
Yeah.
days that I think, who's listening to this, and are they gonna not hire me? And then at
Wow.
the end of the day,
Yeah.
though, for me, I say, well, if they don't want to hire me because of that, then I don't want to work for them.
Yeah.
People
That's really
who I want
interesting.
to work for would hear these stories and be like, wow, what a powerful woman, like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you magnetize those people to partner
Yeah.
with. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
So what is Center for Intimacy Justice?
Center for Intimacy Justice is a nonprofit organization, and we do various campaigns at the intersection of sexuality and social equality. So, our first area that we've been working on is ad equality. We're working to, and we'll talk a lot about that on this in this conversation, but the high level is we're working to change discriminatory ad policies that censor health for women and people with vulvas. And that's our first issue area that we focused on. But over time, and hopefully for decades to come, we'll be working on other issues. Some of them have to do with family law and alternative family structures. Others have to do with sexual assault and creating trauma-informed cultures. We're really passionate about changing our culture, changing our culture related to our sexual culture, and creating spaces where intimacy is a place of equity and equality and well-being and freedom. So our mission ties to that long term, but most of our work the last couple of years has been zeroing in on changing Meta's advertising policies to allow women's sexual health. And we're a team of about 5 women right now, and a bunch of other advisors that are really passionate about this.
So excited to dive deep into ad equality and Meta and all that stuff. Before we do, how do you define intimacy?
Yeah, I don't know that I have a specific definition but it has to do with connection for me. Like, obviously a lot of our work has to do with sexuality, but intimacy is so much broader. I mean, it could be like I remember, you can have intimacy with nature, like not in a sexual way, of course, but just being able to feel connected. And I think intimacy is so connected to what it is to be human, which is we're all living a shared experience as different humans and other parts of nature. And to me, intimacy is what connects different beings together.
Love that. And if you're censored, connection is pretty hard to do, right? So
100%.
When and why did you start for Center for Intimacy Justice?
Yeah, starting in 2017, I started researching the sexual health and wellness space, and then meeting tons of entrepreneurs starting in 2018. And I realized pretty quickly that there were already so many innovative products. I wanted to do something different than starting a product company. I really wanted to help the infrastructure of the field. Like you mentioned Cindy Gallup at the start of this call, and she was somebody that was, and others were talking about how do we elevate sex tech as a whole? How do we move forward this wave together? And I thought that at first I was interested in investing. I thought investing in what you're doing, I thought it can be one valuable way to do it, because you get to have a systems level, you support and get capital into tons of different, several different entrepreneurs. So for a while I worked in investing with a VC fund and also with RIA Ventures, and considered starting a fund. But I felt that this advertising blockage and barrier was so crucial to the entire entrepreneurial ecosystem and to the investment space, because if these companies can advertise, it will make all of these amazing women-led funds like yours be able to achieve the returns that you deserve to be and should be able to achieve. And it will allow more funding to go into the space. You're like nodding for those who are listening on podcast. So I said, like, let's work on creating advocacy for advertising equality. And so we created it as a nonprofit so we could also partner with amazing philanthropic partners. Like The Case for Her has been our first major catalytic backer. And it was really just filling a huge need and gap to be able to bring together so many different investors and people and companies together in support of this advertising reform.
Yeah, as I, write papers and blogs and speak on women's health, I always am, trying to narrow down, like, what are the top 4 barriers to advancing women's health innovation? And one of the 4 major pillars is blocked ads. Because you can put all the money you want, but if the, platforms that say the ad won't run, all the money doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, right? Like, we can't sell it if we can't advertise it, if we can't talk about it. So let's get into this. What is ad equality?
Yeah, so we can start by sharing what the problem is right now. And for people outside of women's health, a lot of people have never heard of this, where basically we have this, incredible rising tide of all these people starting companies. And, you'll go start your entrepreneurial journey, create a startup, and go to advertise your product, which is an essential part of innovation to be able to get information out and reach customers and people with information. And right now, a lot of tech platforms, but also other ad platforms are, like billboards or out of home ads are saying that ads that have to do with women's sexual health are they're classifying them as adult products. So you see it especially with AI or tech platforms, because the algorithms are flagging things like menopause and pelvic pain as adult products, or things like fertility and contraception or parenting, pregnancy related ads. They are not distinct. The algorithms are not advanced enough to be able to allow these health ads. And then in more the policy sphere that's not to do with algorithms, other platforms are also banning certain ads, commercials and things like that. So it's not just tech. And it stunts the entire entrepreneurial ecosystem. We can talk about the ways that it does, but with ad equality, we're working to reform their corporate ad policies. It's not like a government law that's saying you can't advertise. It's companies like Facebook, TikTok, Google, LinkedIn, and others that are taking down the content. And of course, they can be influenced by law and government, but it's corporate practices that need to change so that, the entrepreneurial and market systems can do what they need to of getting people information that they need to support their health.
And so why is basic female things like our biological processes, our stages of life, why are they considered adult? And by adult, you mean like sex, drugs, violence? Like, I'm trying to think of like R-rated.
Yeah.
What do they normally say,
Oh yeah, go on.
Just so, why are they considering women's bodies R-rated adult content?
Yeah, there's double standard in how they're applying specifically for Facebook. The policy for adult is around sexually. It's content that Facebook is seeing as sexual. So they're classifying a large amount, many categories of women's health as sexual. Like if Rachel Brunschel always says, like, I've surveyed my friends about whether vaginal dryness is overly sexual, and like the unanimous answer is no. But things like vaginal dryness, these will just be flagged as like, oh, that's sexual, that's explicit. And there's a historical. I mean, it used to be that contraceptive until I think around the 30s, maybe later, sometime in the first half of the 1900s, 30 states had on the books that you couldn't advertise or sell any form of contraception. Like that was considered obscene. Or even there were these Comstock laws that made it so even sending like a letter that might have had like a love letter that had some sexual undertone used to be illegal through the US Postal Service. So there's a historical precedent for lots of information being censored that is being seen as sexual, but it's incredibly far reaching where I think most people would say that like menopause ads should be allowed and shouldn't be getting misclassified as sexual.
Yeah. And I guess the real issue here, I mean, censorship is the issue, but the issue really is in the inequality that exists for men's bodies being allowed to be advertised. So I think now we can go into what is ad equality.
Yeah, definitely. In terms of the gender difference. So in 2017, Hims and Roe were founded, and there's many other men's health companies, but these two companies were significant. They were started because they raised so much funding so quickly. They were started to address erectile dysfunction. The Viagra patent was about to expire and had some licensing agreements. There were shifts in telemedicine. And these two companies, both started by men, raised hundreds of thousands of dollars very quickly at very high valuations. Yeah, now it's been like definitely a lot more, but I just mentioned the first couple of years, but yeah, now it's like a massive amount of money that they've raised. You're right. And early on, some people talked with Facebook and made it so erectile dysfunction was allowed. Exceptions were made for these companies that have now, from a financial standpoint, been able to grow to massive evaluations. Like I think as of last year, Roe was valued at $5 billion just last year. And then Hims was, it's public now, but at one point was 1.6 billion. And they've just raised an enormous amount of money that's then going into these male founded companies. And in the same 5 years, companies that have been addressing women's health, that have been founded by women, often invested in by women like you, haven't been able to achieve that growth. So there's been a huge difference in the financial trajectories of entrepreneurs based on what you started with. And also Hims Hims has gotten vibrator ads allowed because their ad accounts are so large and they have such influence that these companies that often started as men, raised a lot of money, can now occasionally advertise things that no other, that other women's health companies can't advertise because of the amassing of power. But that's more on the financial side. But then from a health standpoint, because we see erectile dysfunction in the Super Bowl commercials and on the radio constantly, it's really destigmatized. I mean, before 2017, I didn't know anyone who had erectile dysfunction, and it was quieted and shameful. And now it's like, get Viagra delivered directly to your door. And it's done positive things too at reducing shame. But the health conditions that could be getting shared with women about PCOS or endometriosis, or just talking about women's sexual wellness or lubrication, we can't get that same information to people with vulvas that need it because of the ad censorship. And I'll just briefly also share a couple examples of the types of ads. If people go to intimacyjustice.org/report, you'll see a lot of visual examples that we've created, and Polly Rodriguez from Unbound and others have collected, like Dame with the Approved Not Approved campaign, have collected a lot of different examples of the double standards. But you'll see like get hard or get your money back is allowed for erectile dysfunction, with like these eggplants or roosters like that are signifying cocks. These are all allowed. But then going for a jog, women running in a field with an option to talk to your teledoctor about menopause is banned. So it's a huge discriminatory gender difference.
And so these ads are screened not by humans, right? It's algorithms. And so, what boggles my mind is like, how can the algorithm know if it's a chicken breast being promoted by, Chick-fil-A, or it's breastfeeding being promoted by BioMilk or something, right? Like,
yeah.
So do we even know? Is it like this mysterious black box, or like who and how is it deciding what's appropriate and what isn't?
Yeah, there's two policies on the adult or sexual content side that these often get flagged into. One is adult products, so most of the examples we've been talking about. The other is adult content, which is for nudity and what they call sexually explicit content. And it's interesting you mentioned breastfeeding, because we talked to the company Liquid Gold Concept that has a breastfeeding simulator that they sell to hospitals and doctors and educators to educate new parents about lactation. That medical simulator was flagged as nudity because it looks like breasts. Or, Flex, which sells period products and Diva cups, had a medical diagram of a uterus on their website that was flagged and prevented them from advertising because that was seen as inappropriate, like sexual nudity kinds of depictions. So these algorithms will flag nudity, but other products, we think that the word vagina gets flagged a lot more than others, which makes it difficult to say vaginal lotion, vaginal microbiomes, vaginal dryness, and things where you need to be able to talk about anatomy to educate people about health. So the algorithms are a black box. Facebook doesn't have to share information about their algorithms. It's all private, proprietary. So it's hard to know exactly what's happening other than sharing accounts of people saying, these are the words that are more commonly getting flagged, like vagina and several other words. But there is also another lens that it's also intersectional beyond gender. So things like size, bodies with like a skin ratio where there's more skin, the algorithms are picking up. And so like those bodies, their ads pictures get through less than very thin bodies, which is another form of discrimination. And then we've seen that there's ads for white women versus women of color for a women's health ad, where a company called Rotman told us that their ads with women of color, the products were getting flagged more as like drugs, drugs like meth. So they were racist algorithms. So it's beyond gender in terms of the other intersectional lenses where these algorithms are oppressing people. And people, the internet has created more opportunities for expression, but it's also magnified the repression of certain bodies, voices, people because of the exponential expansion of the censorship that is certainly affecting people across different identities more than others.
Yeah. And so for those who have never run an ad before, you keep saying, the ads get flagged. What is the process of your ad being blocked, and what is that experience like for a business owner?
Yeah. So you'll submit the ad and then Facebook is rejecting them. So it doesn't let you run them altogether. And sometimes it still takes the advertiser's money. And also for content, often, TikTok will just, even not for ads, TikTok will just take down your content altogether if it gets classified as sexual, and again, it's often like sex education. It's just things that are really valuable and should be allowed. But also Facebook and Instagram will do shadow banning where your content will just reach fewer people because Facebook sees it as some sort of inappropriate information that gets flagged. But on the ad side, they'll just reject your ad altogether, tell you that you violated the policy. You'll have an option to appeal that's very time consuming. And then either at the end of the appeal, it'll stay banned, or you might be able to get, maybe a quarter of your menopause ads through, but you're wasting a ton of staff time. And then of course your account could get, 50% of the 60 companies that Center for Intimacy Justice studied in a report found that 50% of the 60 companies had their entire accounts banned altogether. And many of them never get the accounts back, or I've talked to some entrepreneurs where they've lost it for years or are permanently banned. Some will be blocked for 6 months, maybe in between a seed round and when they need to raise a Series A and hit bigger numbers, and they're just excluded from that. And the impact on a business, it's just so impactful because, you're running a startup, you have to spend money, you have to hit certain numbers and reach certain growth trajectories, especially if you're on a VC path where you want to attract venture capital funding to be like an exponentially growing company. But when you can't advertise, it's you can reach profitability or grow linearly, but it's close, it's impossible to reach the same growth as those that can access Facebook and Google advertising because it's one of the largest engines for business growth. So it stunts your opportunities to grow, to raise money, to like employ other people. And we know that women employ more women at like massively more rates. So it, prevents people from being able to employ other women. But then the last piece I'll share about the impact is it also prevents you to, from preventing health information, but it's also emotionally really difficult. Like I just got an email yesterday from someone I've never mentioned that was just like, this is so hard. And I just needed to share it with somebody, an entrepreneur. Or I've talked to entrepreneurs where it literally affects their mental health because they feel so silenced and stigmatized. And it makes it harder for them to just feel healthy as entrepreneurs because Facebook is telling them that they're doing something inappropriate, or they wake up never knowing if today's the day that their entire business they're flooding their lives into are going to be shut down. Both the uncertainty and the insulting, stifling information has a real human impact on people that are doing this that is also valuable and measurable and a part of the human equation with this too.
What is the response of Meta and, Twitter and Google and everywhere else where they're flagging stuff, like obviously they've probably gotten our complaints, right? Yeah. Is there any human on the other side of the screen saying, oops, you're right. Like, sorry, here, go ahead, do it. Like what are the corporates' responses to this?
Yeah. The first, well, we're seeing a lot of people reading the report and a lot of people senior in Meta. So we're really interested to figure out what are the conversations, what's happening internally. And, is there interest in fixing this? I'll say the public response with things like Meta's public comments in response to the New York Times article and other articles that reached out to them is that these platforms is that Meta will say, oh, this is a mistake. Our processes aren't perfect. So they often concede that they think that menopause they often will say this is a mistake, which sort of concedes that menopause should be allowed. And they even wrote, they changed their policy in the last couple of years. So now it explicitly says that ads to relieve vaginal dryness, like lubrication or lubricant, are allowed. But then in practice, that nothing's actually changed is what entrepreneurs are saying about the practical experience. But it appears that they're saying, sometimes this is a mistake, but we haven't yet seen them prioritize fixing it, and they can fix it. And also, they're now, for the first time ever, having to answer to Congress on this issue as of February because of the response to Center for Intimacy Justice report in January that led Senator Patty Murray and the Senate Health Committee to ask Facebook questions. So we know that Facebook is having to answer to Congress, and the questions that Senator Patty Murray and her committee and team are demanding from Facebook, but that's all just congressional private information. So the public doesn't know what those reports are saying, but they clearly know about the problem. And so we have eyes on them waiting to see, like, will you fix this? This shouldn't take more than 2 or 3 years. And, let alone they could fix this very fast if they wanted to.
Yeah, they could. Right. And especially because we're offering our money to run these ads.
Yeah.
It's not even like we're giving you more money. Tell us about this report that you just mentioned. It's obviously a very pivotal report. You're in the New York Times. Congress is paying attention. I saw even Hillary Clinton retweeting a tweet about this. So it's very exciting. Tell us about this report. What was it? What did you study? Who was involved? What were the results?
Yeah. And I love the research that you put out about this too. It's like it's all so valuable to work together on this. And we did a survey of 60 women's health companies. And in January 2020, we published the report. New York Times was the first to write about it, and 68 media outlets, including Morning Brew and PR Weekly and many others, followed. It was mentioned in Vogue and many other outlets. And what we found is that of all 60 companies we studied, all of which were led by women or non-binary leaders and founders, every single one of the 60 companies had a Meta platform, so Facebook or Instagram, reject an ad. And 50% of them had Facebook suspend their entire accounts at some point. So we all knew this. You knew this. I knew this. People in women's health knew this. But being able to put that data and to show it's 100% of all of these companies. And so we know it's thousands of companies, not 60. That was just a sampling. Being able to put that in the public eye outraged people from, feminist activists that were reading this, who are like leaders that were standing on to Congress, and other people that read this and were outraged and have taken action. So Hillary Clinton tweeted about this in February, and we think it was really it was actually organic. She just wrote, hey, Patty, who's Senator Patricia Murray, just curious if Facebook responded to the questions that Senator Patty Murray sent them, which was an important historical moment to see this rise to that level of leadership with Hillary Clinton, and made a lot of people feel seen. So that was one of the responses. But I think now that this is in the public, we're seeing a lot of other articles writing about it, a lot of other movements where other people are acting together in response. So I think the report was just really valuable for getting the information out, and people can read it and see more about the types of companies that were included and the visual examples. And of course, it talked about the gender differences, was what it was emphasizing, was saying that this is treated differently for men than it is for women and people with vulvas.
And of those 60 companies, just to put this into context, how many of those were actually sex tech versus fertility or maternal health, or things that we see as beautiful, right? We're always sharing maternity photos and stuff, but God forbid we talk about what happens to your pelvic floor, right? Childbirth. So of your 60 companies, what were some of the distribution of what were they working on?
Yeah, the categories were menopause, pelvic pain, fertility, contraception, pregnancy and postpartum care, education, including some nonprofits that were providing sexual and reproductive health education. There was one out of the 60 was an abortion care provider, Hey Jane, and There were a few other categories. Pleasure made up about 10% of the companies, or 10% of our current data set. Actually, it's probably even more than 90% now that are companies besides pleasure. So that was a component of it, but then there were many, many other aspects of health in addition to it.
Yeah. And so we covered the negative effects it has on a business, and probably many more, but just to kind of like off the bat, the initial consequences. What consequences does ad censorship have on the female consumer?
Yeah, so many. This one stat that always blows me away is that and I've seen this from Onet's ads that they tried to get through. It says that, it takes 3.5 years to sail around the world. It takes 7 to 10 years to get an endometriosis diagnosis from the onset of symptoms, which is a condition that causes all kinds of pain, including, pain during sex, but lots of other challenges and fertility challenges. A lot of people have chronic health conditions in women's health who don't know because their doctors aren't equipped to tell them. There's stigma. And then this ad censorship further prevents information getting in their hands. And so a lot of women who are being disregarded by the medical system already, where people aren't listening to their symptoms or tell them just to, take a Tylenol or have a glass of wine when they're having like serious pain, or serious vaginal pain or other types of pain, it makes it harder for them to get information. And it also, there's also another piece of it where there's this example, there's a company that provides menopause called support and relief called Kindra. And because they can't say vagina in their ads, they'll have to say things like V or, down there, or these other words instead of vagina. And women will feel insulted, where they'll say like, you're insulting me because you can't say the word vagina, not knowing that it's not the brand, it's Facebook that's kind of handcuffing them. But it also further perpetuates stigma about women's bodies, where when we can't have open conversations, it increases stigma and shame in a way that doesn't serve any of us. And frankly, just further perpetuates obstacles for being in control of our own bodies and of our own sexuality in a way that goes far beyond health and has to do with women's sexual agency and empowerment at large.
I mean, yes, I recently was talking to someone about endometriosis, and they said, well, it's genetic. And so a lot of times women get their, period information from their moms. And if their mom has endometriosis that was never diagnosed, and you complain to her about how bad your cramps are, she may likely say, yeah, that's how it feels. And so if there's no other directive in this girl's life to tell her that's not normal, she'll never know it's not normal, right? And so it's so debilitating that she thinks maybe I do have to talk to someone. And then hopefully the doctor believes her, right? So there's like all of these domino effect of the woman being gaslit, right? The whole time.
And there's all this, go ahead. I was just saying there's research where around painful sex, a lot of women, it's been measured that they just believe that painful sex is normal. And, or Sarah McClellan has done these research studies about sexual satisfaction, where people don't have as high of expectations if they're a woman for what their intimate and sexual lives can look like. But there are many other studies besides hers as well about, just the normalization of painful sex for women. I think it's normal when actually it can be pleasurable and it can be powerful, but the narratives that censor communication about that further perpetuate people just believing, I'm just not entitled to well-being, and this is just a normal part of life to have pain and never have an orgasm because of the disparate narratives and standards that we see in our society.
Yeah. I know that Dame Products, they sued the New York City Metro, the subway system, because there was all these phallic looking Hims ads, but they tried to do something that kind of, do you remember what the ads were that got blocked with? What were they trying to portray?
Yeah, they had these pictures of clitoral vibrators, and it was selling their sex toy products.
I actually have some of their products, and I know their company. Too. Their products are not that they're not veiny penises, right?
Yeah.
For listeners, anyone who's like, oh, well, they were showing a sex toy. It's very, it looks like a Tamagotchi. Like it looks like a little thing, right?
Totally.
It's not.
It's not. It's totally clitoral. It's not phallic.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And they were so beautiful. The ads were so beautiful and they were so witty and educational. It was like, 98% of men like get where they're going, because it was like a subway thing, but like only 60%, 8% of women get there or something like that. Like it was in a
Yeah.
very educational way, nodding to the orgasm gap of these beautiful non-phallic clitoral ads. They were so awesome. And even, yeah, and they got very muted even when 2.5 years later they could advertise. Like you couldn't tell what the ads were for. I loved the original ads.
Oh, so even after the lawsuit finished, there's still a lot of boundaries on what they can do and say.
Yeah, it's abstract art. They couldn't show the product, and you would look at the ads and wonder like, oh, I wonder what Dame is. I mean, they're
Yeah.
like still huge victory for Dame that they fought for 2.5 years. But I think even, I think they wanted to be able to say what the product said. They wanted it to be clear. And the ads were only allowed to run for a quarter or a number of months, but none of the rest of the category could never advertise. And they also weren't guaranteed to advertise beyond that brief stretch. But yeah, it was abstract art, very difficult to tell what the ads were for, and lost the educational element too.
And so,
But power to them still. It just shows how far we have to still go.
100%. But like, so are lawsuits the solution? Like, that's actually my last question as we talk, finish up talking about ad equality is, what do we do? Like, what do I do?
Yeah.
What do listeners do? Like, what is do we know what the solution is? It's probably multi-pronged approach, but tell us, what can we do?
Yeah, the question we're asking is, how can we increase our power? Like, how can we have more power over this issue and a voice where Facebook has to listen to it? And I think one element of that is like wielding the media. I remember after I was dealing with a sexual assault and got the results where Harvard said it never happened, I like sat up and was like, we have to learn how to use the media, because sometimes as women or people of, diverse genders, or non-binary people, like using your voice in culture and publicity ends up being where we can go when laws fail and when courts fail or when systems fail us. Like we still have a voice that's loud and that people resonate with. So part of that is media advocacy. I think the other key piece is we have like collectively, there's so much talent and so many powerful voices, and also capital and financial support among the thousands of people that are in this space and have an interest in it changing. And so we're working on how can we build more systematized ways that we can collectively work together. So Center for Intimacy Justice is creating a membership approach where hundreds of companies can pool our resources together. And that's something that companies, businesses, nonprofits, investors, and individuals can be a part of. And then for individuals listening that may not be with a company or an organization, there's a lot of brands to align with. Center for Intimacy Justice through our newsletter is one where, as we do collective campaigns and partner with you and with others on them, people can share their individual voices and petitions by joining upcoming campaigns. There is a longer conversation around what are our legal tactics. And we've spent a year or two researching, like I could tell you, these are the 4 tactics in the courts or through shareholder activism, and these are the pros and cons of that approach. So there's also been legal analysis done about, if we do leverage law, what are our options? And one of the 4 that CIJ has found most promising is filing a Federal Trade Commission complaint to pressure the government to, at the FTC level, sue Facebook. But we're also partnering directly with Congress and the Senate Help Committee to also leverage Congress's ability to pressure Facebook publicly. So there's a lot of approaches in addition to those that can be taken legally.
Wow. You are doing very important work. I am so grateful that you're doing it, because as someone who's supports founders and invests in founders, this is a critical issue, not only for like social equality, but like for smart investing. I try to spend my day encouraging people to put their money into femtech, and it's hard to do so when you also know that most of that money might go to waste because ads will get blocked and accounts will be taken down.
Yeah, 100%.
Jackie, our last 2 questions our listeners love. The first one is, if someone wanted to start a femtech company, what's an area in women's health and wellness that you think still needs innovating?
Yeah. Well, I would say I think each individual founder brings their own life experiences. And so starting, it goes like the writer Louisa May Alcott would say, like, write about what you know about. Same with entrepreneurship. Like, entrepreneur about what you know about. And so a lot of the founders in the space have started businesses of things that they have experiences with. But there's, I'm personally very passionate about the women's pleasure space. But there's so many other sectors that need innovation around parenting, pregnancy, birth, tons of other areas. And I think so much of it is about personal expertise and what can people bring in. And our individual lives are a skill. Like, you can market a skill like learning how to build a financial model or fundraise, but like our lived experiences are also, our most valuable skill. So I think that's a really valuable place to start from as innovators.
Do you think innovation in advertisement and marketing could be a femtech angle?
100%. Yeah. CRJ is one of the first organizations working on this, but there's tons of space for collaborators. People can be strategists, people can be lawyers, people can be writers, authors, journalists, on ad equality, media creators. Like we need to have a documentary film about this or other film and mainstream.
Netflix.
Like, yeah, we need like a Netflix show, 100%. So like we need multimedia creators and producers. Like there's tons of places where people can share about ad equality. And when you're sharing about ad equality, it's not just femtech. It's not just entrepreneurship. It's like empowering women to have a voice more broadly. It's like rethinking our norms around women's sexuality and culture and partnership. Like there's a cultural movement that people can be at the helm of. So we need more leaders in it. Like I got into the space 5 years ago after a wave of other people like Cindy Gallup and Polly Rodriguez and Alex Fine and others that were in it before. And like, there's just going to be more and more generations. Like we need all hands, and ad equality is certainly a space where people can drive efforts, lobbyists, like congressional policy strategy, tech policy, like there could be more specialists because we need all the talent we can get. But I want there to be a Netflix show about it.
Netflix, come on, I better be on it.
Yeah, 100%.
Our last question is, what do you think the femtech industry as a whole needs the most right now in order to be successful? Collective
power. And I think you're building that with Femtech Focus, like creating those communities. By the way, your Femtech Focus job fair, which is like the best thing ever. We've met so many incredible, talented people, but I think, spaces like that where collective power is always more powerful than individual power. And Femtech, you see that because we're a movement, we're together. Like you sent this email question before about like, what is Femtech? And I see it as a collective and I see it as a movement. And the more spaces we have to collectively share our power, and even like there's a few entrepreneurs like Unbound and Dame that were the first entrepreneurs to fund Center for Intimacy Justice, or other philanthropists that have supported that. We're just, when we come together and like see this shared mission that we have together, we can be so much more powerful. So I love spaces where we can meet in person and just exponentify our hearts and minds and resources and tactics and strategies and brains. And I also think that Femtech needs ad equality. We need to be allowed to advertise and to nip this, this needs to become part of the historical past, this discrimination, and not a present 10 years or 5 years from now. I
cannot wait for that milestone to be accomplished when we can say, oh my God, remember when we couldn't advertise about menopause? Woman running in a field was inappropriate.
Yeah.
Clothes, by the way, y'all, if you're like, what?
Yeah.
Go check out the example on the website. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Jackie, totally. You're amazing. Thank you so much.
You're amazing.
I appreciate you being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks for all you do. You're amazing.
Awesome. I just ended the audio. You're amazing.
Yay, you're so awesome. Thank you I was so happy when you sent the email about having me on this.
Yeah. Let me just save this really fast. So we have one last thing that I like to ask.
Oh, yeah.
Episodes kick off with you introducing yourself and saying what Femtech is to you. And so the template is, hi, I'm Jackie Rotman. I'm the founder, CEO of Center for Intimacy Justice. And Femtech to me is, and then you give some kind of definition or philosophical meaning. Some people do it specific to what they do in their industry. Some people do more like kind of overall. Did you have something in mind that you wanted to say?
Yeah, I don't have like the exact thing written, but I can make out a sentence or two.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll just be quiet for a second. And then whenever you're ready, go ahead. And again, just remember it's your name, title, organization. Femtech to me is.
Okay, sounds good. I'm trying to think of how it, like, I might think one more second to think because I didn't write it before. Okay. Okay, I'll see if the sentence comes out. Okay. I'm Jackie Rotman. I'm the founder and CEO of Center for Intimacy Justice. And Femtech to me is a collective. It's a movement of women, people of all genders working together to improve the health, wellness, well-being of people of all genders so we can have health and joy in all areas of our lives and health. That was a little redundant.
Yeah.
Do you want to redo it?
Invite you to do it again. I love
Sounds
the message.
Like lots of words.
It's a collective, it's a community of, of all genders and all sexes, like working towards a common goal of improving human health. Like,
perfect. Oh yeah, that sounds great. Okay. Just like cut the last like 25 random words. Perfect. Okay. Cool.
Whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Awesome. I'm Jackie Rotman. I'm the founder and CEO of Center for Intimacy Justice. And I believe Femtech is a collective and a movement and community of people of all genders working toward a common goal of improving human health and well-being. Thank you for your coaching on that.
No worries. That's what I'm here for. Perfect. Well, it's all good to go. Let me check the schedule. I can tell you exactly what date's going to come out.
Cool. Do you do all the posting, or like, how do you, I want to make a podcast on family law this year, and it seems like you have a good system.
Yeah. And I'm happy to share it with you if you want. I have like a little playbook because I have so many interns that cycle through, because I don't have money to pay them. And so I have like internships. And so I have a playbook so that we can continue this. Amazing. So I don't mind sharing that with you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, the social media posts and like the graphics for social media, I do have somebody I pay like $500 a month, and she makes the graphics and posts them. But I do the episode editing. I just do it in GarageBand. Honestly, like I just do plug and play of a template that I had somebody help me make, and that's what I use. And then I just post it on. We use StreamYard, I think. Is it StreamYard? Nice. Why do I feel like?
And you find that it helps? Like it's
Simplecast. Awesome. I knew it wasn't StreamYard. StreamYard's that thing with the duck. Simplecast is what I use, and you just upload it there. That pushes it out to all the streaming services. It gives you quantification on like how many listeners, downloads, where they located, stuff like that. And that's it. I mean, honestly, I think most podcasts have to do a lot more marketing than us, but luckily we have the advantage of, if someone's interested in Femtech, we got the SEO down, and there's not many Femtech podcasts. So if you look up Femtech and Spotify, we're like the only thing that shows up.
That's amazing. So that's our
advantage. Yeah.
And you're saying, and overall for FM Tech, like you guys come up a lot.
Oh, we're like, we're it.
That's amazing.
Girl. Yeah.
Like you just like,
I don't really have to do almost any marketing. We post about it on every week to kind of like show like, oh, hey, this week we interviewed so-and-so, but we're not running ads. We're not, it just, the listeners come.
That's incredible. Can I ask how many listeners you have?
Yeah, we have about 50,000.
That's amazing. That's incredible. That's like total, or like what's, that's amazing.
Yep, total. And we have listeners in about 107 countries, every continent except Antarctica.
That's incredible. Sweet. Good to know. Yeah, I'm excited to learn about all that stuff.
Cool.
Thanks for the info.
Yeah, no problem. And sorry, once again, I am opening this sheet so I can tell you exactly when your episode's going to come out. Yours is technically, if you don't mind, I would love for yours to actually, it's supposed to not be until June, but I have some rearranging in my schedule. Would you be okay if we posted yours on May 16th?
Yeah, definitely.
So it's like 3 or 4 weeks away.
Okay, awesome. That sounds great.
Cool. So I'll just move some things around on my side, but yeah, that's when yours will come out. Okay.
Perfect.
Awesome.
I'm excited.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.